All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I am very excited to begin our talk and welcome you to our virtual summit that is happening every Wednesday and Thursday throughout the month of April. The topic of our summit is, all of our topics are focused on leading in a crisis. And let me just check. I know that folks are coming on, and as you're coming on, I want to say hello. Do let me know if you're able to hear us well, and if you can see our screen and our fancy dancy little video there. I want to address the technology early if there's a problem. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
There we go. All right, so our topic for our entire month of April is very timely, as we all know, leading in a crisis, business and HR strategies for navigating chaos and change. And our topic today, emotional intelligence, control, influence, accept, the CIA model. I absolutely love that CIA model. I've been starting to use it here recently just from reading your materials, Ray, and having good conversations with you. So I think that we've had a lot of folks that have been interested in this call. So I'm pleased that we're going to be able to bring them something valuable. To get us started, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. David Whitmarsh is an expert in HR information technology consulting and also in multi-channel marketing and communication strategies. I also want to say thank you to our partner and our sponsor, Insperity. Insperity has been gracious enough to offer participants a free HR financial analysis report and debrief. And just very quickly, this report is kind of a big deal. There's no obligation for you to do work with the company, et cetera. They will take a look at your HR budget, they do the analysis work. They come back to you and do a confidential report and one-on-one debrief. It'll take the business performance advisor somewhere between 5 and 10 hours worth of work that they're doing just simply for free for our attendees. So I'm very appreciative and grateful for that contribution. So thank you, Insperity. You can see on the bottom of your screen there how to retrieve that is turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report. And it is case sensitive. HR and the R in report are all capitalized. So check back often for our summit over this next month. We have 40 plus speakers and counting, and right now only 20 something of us are live and have our talks online. One of the reasons that I've already shared today why I put this together is I'm not really a person that can sit in the slow lane when things are happening slowly and there's crisis at hand. I'm one of those people that are like, if I can't wallow in my own misery, I can't worry, I've got to do something. What can I do? And so I reached out to Ray and the other speakers that you guys are, some of you are signed up for, and said, what can we do to help? How can we bring forth our expertise in a meaningful way to support our peers, clients, and friends? And so we have literally pulled off in a matter of less than 10 days, what typically takes about 90 days to accomplish. And we're already getting positive feedback about, these are very timely. Topics are very relevant, from things like neuro leadership and leading others with a cool head and a warm heart, to maximizing performance, all the way to managing a new to remote team. And of course, we're going to have later today an outplacement specialist for managing one of the most difficult times in an HR professional's life and in a business owner's life or a CEO's life. There is nothing like not being able to keep your employees, being forced to let them go. So later today, we'll have an expert on that. So one of the special offers that we're offering to all attendees is also buy one, get one virtual training. All of the topics that are covered in our virtual summit, as well as ones that we don't yet have a speaker for, like crisis management and business continuity and adaptability and fast tracking your strategic foresight, maximizing performance, preparing for layoff, downsizing, and outplacement, et cetera. So just be in touch with me if we may support your goals in your organization. I want to jump right over. I don't know, remember if I introduced myself or not, but my name is Anissa Avon, and I'm the CEO of TurnKey Coaching Solutions. And Ray Weaver and I have worked together. Gosh, Ray, I think it's since 2013. But
yes, correct.
All right, good. Ding, ding. Ray is one of those consummate leadership development experts and executive coaches and trainers that never fails to deliver for our clients. Our clients love Ray. They want more of Ray. And frankly, so does my team and I, because Ray is a master at what he does, but he's also very much a modeler of the principles that he's going to share with us today. He takes it to heart that this is how he wants to live. So Ray, tell us about yourself. Tell us what we're going to learn today.
Well, just a little bit about me. I think you see my bio there, but I'm a military veteran of 30 years, United States Air Force. And in that role, what I did, I was assigned a lot to kind of coach and advise senior leaders on matters that were helping, that affected their employees, more of a senior HR representative. And from that, what I learned by working around a lot of these senior leaders, some who were even, if anybody know anything about the military, 3-, 4-star people who were running some major campaigns, some major things with some major headaches and some major decisions that could cost people their lives in their hands. And so in that, I stopped and I would really watch them of how they performed during a crisis, how they worked through situations as they came up. And we would sit back afterwards and we would do these little after actions reports. But most of their after action, they not only did the after action report about what went on, but they would also do an after action report on themselves about look at how could they have shown up differently, how could they have been different, how could they have developed differently. And so in that, they created this control, influence, accept model that allowed them crisis to really focus on what was really needed. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. So
hey, how did you get that little drone to fly? That's pretty clever.
Well, I do have in the military, we used to say that we have a badge in PowerPoint. So I do have my PowerPoint Ranger badge. Okay.
Very good.
With that, so as we go through, I want you to just thinking about control, and you see that little thing that's kind of staying steady and all the rest of that stuff. And so as we get to control, I want you to be thinking about you as a leader right now. You're kind of keeping the ship. You're trying to keep in the plane. You're trying to keep your business kind of steady right now. And then as we get into the influence piece, we're going to talk about that much of what we're doing as leaders as we start realizing that certain things are out of our control, but we may be able to influence the outcome by how we show up differently. And then finally, we're going to be talking a little bit about what are certain things that we really kind of have to accept. And we're going to kind of dig into that a lot deeper. So right now, just consider control, influence, accept. All right, next slide, please.
Yeah.
And that's what we're kind of going to do today. I'm going to run this a little different because at nature, I'm just a coach. And a coach approach everything from a coach perspective in the sense of seeing you as whole and capable of making the decisions that's best for your organization because you understand the culture, you know the people, you know what's needed in your region. Even though right now there's some things that are uncertainty, there are certain things that you know that's needed from you that's just the right thing to do that you're actually engaging on and making it happen. So in that, what we're going to do is, of course, going to introduce this tool today and working through challenging times and situations. And in these challenging times and situations, what I want you to consider is we know that the challenge is real, that the struggle is real right now. And what I want you to be aware of, sometimes what we're dealing with when we're dealing with leaders is the struggle is the real because the struggle may be us. The stories we're telling ourselves, trying to not processing that this is a new normal. So in that, we're going to be talking about these challenging times and situations, but part of this too is right now as a leader. And let me just say, when I'm talking about leader, I'm not just talking about someone who has the title. I'm talking about we're all leaders, that we all have the capability of showing up in a different way to help a situation move forward. Some of us may now, some skill sets that those who are above us may not have, that we may have developed that's really needed now. And are we willing to put it out there and lead others through this crisis too, even those who may have a title above us. It's requiring us now to see ourselves from the leadership perspective as collaborative partners, regardless of what our role and title is. So as we go through, we'll keep going through that and talk about that a little bit more. Also, what we want to try to talk about today too is a little bit of interrupting your narrative to allow you to regain our center. Right now, we got a lot of things going on, a lot of stories in our head, all these things that we could catastrophize on, that we're now having to manage our stories. And much of what we're seeing has nothing to do with how we're reacting, has nothing to do with what we see or hear. It's actually the story we're telling ourselves. And if you don't think that's true, I'm going to tell you right now, not one time did I think about when all this stuff started that I need to go buy a bunch of toilet paper. I don't know where it came from.
I'm not so sure your crisis mode is in.
So,
the rest of us have tried to stock up.
No, that was not my first thought. So in that, I had to interrupt my narrative. Hey, okay, I got some here. I'm okay. But I'm always having to, and if you see, I'm going to kind of go through this because sometimes I'm realizing that some of my own thinking I'm starting to have to laugh at myself too. Okay. Then also we're going to take a few moments and give ourselves permission to just breathe, to think and freely engage in this new normal. Because that's part of the thing too, is that we don't realize right now is that we're in this heightened state and we're actually in this flee, fight, or freeze mode. And a lot of times we're not breathing, so that may sometimes get us to respond in a way that's really not helpful. So as we move through it, we'll talk about this. And finally, what I really want your objective here is for you to learn. Because everything we're doing here is we're providing you knowledge. Then we're hoping you're taking some of these things that you learn in these seminars we're putting out there, that you go to apply them so that you can develop. All of this is really a growth opportunity for you to really kind of define, okay, what do I really need to grow in? How do I can develop? So part of this is we're going to give you these knowledge of this learning in the hopes that you'll develop. But I want you to understand the road from learning to development is paved with application. So I want you to consider, are you taking some of these things and where are you applying them? And I want you to start with you first, to kind of model the way. And not only am I talking about apply this in your businesses, but also apply some of these things at home. A lot of you got a lot of great knowledge. You've been to a lot of great trainings. You've been to a lot of great things in your lives that may also now apply at home. As you're bringing families home and everybody's there, the way you organize, the way you structure things, the way you develop people, that's going to be needed now even more so in the homes than it is also what you've learned in doing the business. It's almost having to run your home like a business where you can keep things going, keep things focused, and also engage with people so they can stay motivated. And sometimes those people now are your children, so you're going to have to kind of show up a little differently to kind of support them through this too, just like you would your own employees. And also something too that I want you to consider too from a standpoint is, before we never had to worry about, or we never had to really take in consideration what was going on in people's homes. But now, where now everybody's working, more and more people are working from home, that now we have to be concerned about that, because that impacts. Because now they're having a lot more to do. So that's really, their home life is really impacting our businesses too. So in that, we're having to be a little bit more compassionate. We're having to be a little different now to process this new normal, not only for ourselves, but also possibly operate a different way. So those that we lead, or those that we're connected with, or that we're partnering with, that we collaborate with, can also work through this process at the same time and operate in this new normal too. How are we doing so far?
Yeah, very topical. One of the things that I hope that you'll also help us understand today is this model you're talking about, and being able to adapt. Just in what you've said so far, I'm beginning to take away that it's not just about processing through the systems or the memos or the checklist of here's how we prepare. It is also recognizing that if we're going to get through this with our sanity and our health, that it also is about managing our emotions and supporting our team in finding ways to address the real reality of the fears and the doubts and the anxiety that we're facing.
You're spot on. Because that's what we're talking. Much of leadership is about relationship management, but also energy management. And so part of that is what we're doing. Are we operating in a way right now that's needed from us? So much of the time we've done a lot of automatic things where we've just been on automatic. And now we're in this new situation where the automatic is not going to work. And we have to be very intentional about how we show up, intentional about what we're trying to move forward, and kind of have a thought process to work through to go, okay, this is what I'm really trying to intent to move forward. How do I need to be? How do I need to behave that can really allow this to move forward? And we'll be getting into that too. So for a moment here, what we want to do is I'm going to have a self-awareness moment, because I wouldn't be a good coach if I didn't ask a good coach question. So in that, for this moment here, I want you to, this is what I want you to know. I want you to ask yourself, what have you learned about you during this pandemic? Notice, it's not about what you learned about everyone else, but what have you learned about you during this pandemic? And go ahead and share that if you could.
So folks, share that in the chat box if you would, and I'll share quickly, Ray, about me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I am we can do it kind of business owner. Bring it on. We got this. And so at any given moment, we may have 50 initiatives, and my team is like, and what this situation has caused me to do is prioritize, recognize that time with my family is important, time for rest is important, and shifting the priorities around to really focus on what really matters. What can I contribute to? And so for me, it's been about refocusing, reprioritizing, and then head down. I don't have time to worry. Head down on what I can control.
There you go. And for me, I can just say on a lighter side, what I've learned is that I can irritate my wife very easily. And that I have to be a little bit more intentional about how I show up, and how like you're saying, those important relationships, and that I'm really having to be very attentive, very focused, very being there and present, instead of my mind being off elsewhere. And I realized that was something I really need to work on. So I'm learning that about myself.
Beautiful. Karen wrote, I've learned that I am resilient and able to show up as a light in a dark time. Beautiful. Sheila wrote that while I was surprised how quickly I can get swept up in the anxiety, and I am able to just as quickly ground myself and focus in on what matters. Paige has written, support systems are all around you. There is hope. Scott, thank you. He wrote, I can be very functional and productive working and managing from home, and my honey to-do list keeps growing.
Yes. Scott, yes.
Well said. Mary, goodness, I am in healthcare. Mary, thank you for all the work you're doing. But I am at high risk due to age and underlying conditions, so cannot be on campus at this time. She's feeling terribly guilty about not being on site. The truth is that you still are there supporting us, and we're also grateful that you're taking care of your health. It's critical. Heidi has written how much I am the thermostat in the organization and am having to lead upwards every day. Boy, do we understand. I've learned to be more kind, she says.
Thank you all for sharing that. And I'm going to just throw that question out there to you. Now that we're going to a lot of virtual conversations and virtual worlds, we kind of have to be a little bit more attentive too about using questions that will kind of bring people in and to connect through this virtual world. So I just throw that question out there to you, that you may want to use that question to ask of your team as you start your next meeting, just to kind of get a kind of sense of where everyone's at. Because part of this time now in this new virtual world that we're working in is we got to kind of create some content to where people can really connect. And sometime by asking the coach questions and coaching people through these things and just putting those questions out there to really get to the sense of what's really going on with people, it will allow your team to grow, and you can really get some great activities and some more insight to bring this collaborative team together and make it stronger. If you go next slide, please, I appreciate it.
There we go.
All righty. And notice what I want you to put this here about self-awareness. And I'm going to read this quote just in case we have people who are on telephone listening in too. The battle for self-awareness is an endless one. The ability to step back and see yourselves from a distance, to analyze your own flaws and weaknesses, to understand your own motivations. This is not only easy, it's basically not natural. we were given, cursed with all sorts of biases and blind spots that work against self-knowledge on a daily basis. So I just want you to kind of be aware of that, is that part of this, as we get into the EQ, and we're going to be getting into the definition here soon, the greatest part of it is getting some self-awareness. So part of that questionnaire, just asking you, what did you learn about yourself? It's just because these kind of things too, as you move through this time, what it's going to really help you to do is to kind of step back and look at some of your actions over the day and just, okay, what did I learn? What was showing up? And also really getting to really understand your triggers, understanding when your body, using your body and your emotions to really kind of help you, guide you through these things, letting you know that, hey, what's really happening to me, using those emotions and those feelings you're having, and really asking, what are they trying to tell me? So that you'll know when you're probably getting stressed, or knowing when you need to take a breath, knowing that when you need to kind of step back a little bit and recenter. So as we move forward, some things that, if you could click one more time, please. Mm-hmm. Some questions that may help you to journal through right now, if you're not used to journaling, but just some things you may want to ask yourself as we move through this new normal is, what habits did I curb today? Notice I didn't say what habits did you stop. It's just what did you curb? Making these small little tweaks and getting this self-awareness of, where am I getting better at? Where am I changing? Where am I developing at? How am I better today? To really take a look at and really say, how am I better today? Do I'm feeling a little bit better? Am I taking care of myself? Am I eating right? How am I better today? Were my actions just? By the decisions I made today, were they ethical? Were they legal? Were they moral? There are certain things that are legal to do, but they may not be ethical or moral thing to do. So in that, we're having to stop and really kind of having to ask ourselves these kind of questions. And also, how can I improve today? So I'm throwing those things out there to you so that you can kind of use those in any one, all four, just pick one for the day to just help you kind of get a little bit more self-awareness, so you can see how you're developing and how you're growing through this crisis, and what you're actually developing in, and the new skill sets that you're coming, and new tools that you're being able to bring as you move forward.
I've got a quick question for you. So I did notice that you said, what habit did I curb today, as opposed to what habit did I cease and desist on, or build today? Why is that? Why is that a more important question?
Because it's more important, because what we're trying to do is have you do small tweaks. Because part of what we learned through the neuroscience research is that your brain is trying to do one of two things. It's trying to survive, or it's trying to conserve energy. So whenever you try to change something right away, it's going to push back. And I want you to consider, have you ever, previously, when you ever tried to lose weight or anything like that, we all want to do that. But it's the other things that go along with it, of like getting up 5 o'clock in the morning, running, all the rest of that stuff. And it's always a challenge, because your brain wants to stay in a level where it's comfortable. It's got a routine, and it wants to stick to that routine. Yeah. So much of what we're doing today is, if we try to change everything right away, it's going to push back, and it's going to create a real big struggle for us, and it's going to probably feel a little bit overwhelmed. So much of that is not really how did I just change everything, but what did I curb? So what did I just tweak today? Because if we can go small little tweaks, small little changes every day, and we start seeing them, it allows us to get there, and we won't be the barrier to that.
Very good. Very good. I know we've got a lot to cover, but there's 2 books that I've read recently that are just brilliant about it. And one of them is Atomic Habits. James Clear, I think, don't quote me, but Atomic Habits. And the other one is Habit Stacking.
Yeah. So part of this too is this, what I noticed when I was working with those leaders in crises, they did not try to do everything all at once. They were very targeted at what they were doing, very focused at what they were doing, and they were building the capacity as we went on, understanding that we need to do this, but also understanding people around them needed to build capacity. So it was hey, we'll tweak here, we'll tweak here, we'll tweak here. Now there are some times when you just have to go full on to do what's got to be done, but also there are times when you where you just tweak it a little bit to make it happen, so that you can easily work through it and get there.
Love it.
Right. So in that, for emotional intelligence, and I'm using this term bluff, and what that means, bottom line up front, if anyone asks, okay?
Oh, I like it.
Okay. Emotions are involved in everything we do. every action, decision, and judgment. Even those who say, well, I'm a great thinker and I don't get it. We all get emotions. Our emotions are part of who we are. They're part of our early warning system. They're part of just nature of being human. We're going to have emotions. So emotionally intelligent people recognize this and use their thinking to manage their emotions rather than being managed by them. So as we move forward to folks also, when we're talking about emotional intelligence, it's the capability of individuals to recognize their own emotions and those of others, to discern between different feelings and label them appropriately, use emotional information to guide your thinking, and all, but more so to guide your behavior. Because people are really looking at your behavior. So much of this is guiding your behavior. How am I behaving to help others and myself to process through this crisis? Then also it allows you to manage and adjust emotions to adapt to environments. And so that's the big thing. We're in this a new normal, so we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more adaptive, and understanding the environment we're in. And part of that is understanding the environment so you can say, what is needed from me now?
Yeah.
What's needed from me now? Next slide, if you could, please.
Yeah.
So in that, most of you seen this map, but I just want to break it down in a kind of different area here. And you'll know at the top, you'll see what says to the far left, you'll see personal competence. And then below that, you'll see the social competences. Then above that, you'll see the recognition and then regulation. So self-awareness is the recognition. And all of this thing with emotional intelligence, it all starts with knowing you first. And what I always jokingly say, knowing your own crazy. Knowing and being aware of who you are and what you bring, what your triggers are. And the greater you can be self-aware, the greater you have of your self-awareness, the better you can regulate. And so right now, that's the point of me asking you, are you taking time to kind of do an after action report of your day? Just a few moments just to kind of evaluate how you showed up, what got done today, not just what got done, but how you showed up. What was your intention? And by what you intended, by the way you behaved, that actually come to be. Because part of that is that self-awareness so we can kind of stop. So now I can go and I can adjust my behavior or regulate or self-manage my emotions, my initiatives, and my optimism to kind of put me under control. So as we move on below that is now how I am aware of myself, of how I show up. Now I can be socially aware because I'm aware of how I'm operating. I'm aware of how I'm showing up. So now I can be social aware and start seeing what's going on. So now I can relationship manage. So in part of that, that's that emotional intelligence block. And we're going to be coming back to this, but I want you to just kind of get a good picture and just start thinking about right now, what are some of the tweaks you can make on your own behavior that will allow you to better operate in the current situation. If you want to share that, go ahead. I'll just wait a minute. What are some of the behaviors that if you just modify a little bit, or the behaviors you've had to modify that has allowed you to be better at showing up and working with others in this current situation?
So while you folks are answering in the chat, Ray, talk to me a moment about, it is one thing, right, to have an awareness that I feel anxiety, or that someone I love has a lot of anxiety right now. And, you know, that anxiety is real. The reality of what we're experiencing is fear and uncertainty and anxiety are real emotions. And we can be self-aware of that. What are some healthy examples of that management of it? Because we also know people who are managing their emotions through the bottle, or through inappropriate behaviors, or through stuffing it down so deep that they're not taking the appropriate social distancing or other actions. What is an appropriate regulation of these very real, raw, difficult emotions?
That is a very good question. And so part of that I can just share from what I've noticed about myself is that I'm having to, part of the regulation piece is I'm learning to breathe more. I'm doing some meditation in the morning and prayer time in the morning, where I'm making that time and taking a few minutes just to kind of get myself set before I just jump into anything. And so I'm taking some time to give myself some space, knowing that that's what I need so I can be my best. I'm also realizing too, part of this self-regulation piece for me now is the first week or so, I sat there and I was binge watching a lot of things. I was staying up way past hours, and I start
You're the
realizing,
reason my internet was down. Why
and
my Netflix was choppy.
so I start realizing, hey, that's not helpful for me. So I went back to my normal bedtime and just saying, okay, 9:30, 10 o'clock, usually about 10 o'clock is when I'm in bed. And so I just start doing that and realize I need to get my rest. I still need to do these things. So when I am called on, I can be there. And I know for some of you, you're working long hours, but so in that, as I was always told, get the rest when you can. Also, I'm asking myself and watching what I'm really eating right now, because I'm noticing that I really have to kind of watch that, because it's just not healthy for me, because I'm one of those people with some pre-existing conditions that they warn us we have to be very careful with, but I don't want my eating to affect those conditions, so I'm having to do that. And so those are just some little things like that. And also what I'm doing too is I've had my exercise routine has been interrupted. So I used to go run a lot and do those kind of things, run, walk, get out a lot. So instead of doing those, I'm having to do it from home. A simple thing that kind of helps me to remind myself just to even do some strength exercises is now every hour, I'll just get on the floor and I'll do 10 to 15 push-ups. Just something kind of simple where I'm trying to make it as easy as I can for myself to do that, so it helps me regulate. And after the push-ups, I'll stop and I'll just do a mindfulness exercise too, just for a minute or so, just to kind of clear it, and then I can move forward.
So to replay what you're sharing with us, if we're in HR, for example, it is
Right.
about teaching
Right.
recognition and regulation, or
Yes.
recognizing where you are, recognizing what's not supporting you, and responding to it in some small way. We're not talking about, oh, I'm not working out, I'm going to go run a marathon. We're talking about, okay, 10 push-ups will do.
Right. And where we realize in this, I'm doing something, just like you mentioned, as a business owner, you're doing something. So part of that's, I'm still doing everything I can that still helps me stay healthy, helps me move forward. I may not be able to do everything I want to do, but I'm having to accept that, hey, this is a situation I'm in, so what can I do? And we'll be
Very
getting
good.
into that in a minute. Okay.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. And here's the model. And it's a simple control, influence, and accept. So let's first start on the far right side on accept. And you'll see that say, this is not the notion of, I can't do anything about it. So a lot of times you say, oh, there's certain things, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is about getting a clear grasp of what you're facing, minus your denial, your gaslighting, and any of your biases. This requires vulnerability, honesty about the situation. And this is where we're at. What am I really facing here? We can complain, we can do whatever, but we have to stop and say, what am I really facing here? And listen, you gave a good example of that. You said, okay, this is what I have to accept. This is the situation now. Now from that, let me just, you got a clear sense of where it's at. Now, and all of us, we're going to hit a point where we're going to complain, we're going to get angry, and so we're going to do that. Okay, we can do that. We may have to cry, whatever. That's fine. But the first step is focus your energy. For your first step to focus toward energy toward improvement is you got to get a real clear understanding of where you're at. And the way I said is, I heard that we had some people who are in the medical field. It's like when a patient comes in, it's just kind of assessing, this is what's really going on. This is the most critical need, right? This is the most critical thing I'm facing. And we can sit there, well, how did they do that? And why did they do? Well, yeah, right now that's not going to help us any. I just have to accept this is what it is. So in that, asking that question, what is the reality of what I'm facing? And this is the reality. This is the new world we live in. This is the new normal. And much of what we're doing is we have a hard time to accept is because we have these images in our head of how these stories are what we call these unenforceable stories of how we think everything should be. So much of this is accepting this is what it is right now. And in that, I want you to consider this too. One thing that will really kind of help you kind of start taking an idea and accepting where you're at is asking your question about, what is the purpose of my complaining about it? We can complain about things that happen to us or that are right now that are going on, but what's the real purpose of my complaint? If it's just to kind of vent, okay, now I've vented, now what? And so in that, even for you, as you're going through things in this time, you may be asked some things that are a little difficult for you and all these things. The point is just kind of stop and say, okay, in this new situation, this may be some things I need to do or being asked of me. So I need to accept that. And that's the same way right now we're being accepted. I live in California. So this is our third week of being in the time where we've been asked to stay home. So we just kind of accepted it. And I've met some people who are having a hard time with it. And I had a friend of mine, actually a person I was coaching in Jordan, and he works from home a lot. And he was saying he said now that he is told he's got to stay home, it becomes a problem for him. And a lot of that is just the story he's telling himself. And so we had to work through him going, okay, yeah, let me just accept this is what it is and understand the reason of why people are being asked to do what they do. And now we can move forward. Was there any questions there for you, Anissa, that you had?
No, I think that you've covered some of it. I'm looking forward to putting the CIA together.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to do that. And so in that, once we can accept, now we can start looking at the things, okay, now what's under my control? And there are certain things for your certain positions, certain skill sets you may have that put you in different control. And that's the thing, when we're talking about, this is your recognizing what you have in your hands, which is your skills, your resources, and kind of data, and doing the best you can with what you got. So what's under my control? And many times what I'm just going to ask everybody right now is just, if you could, I want you to take your hands and kind of hold it like that. I hope you can see my hands where like you're trying to receive something. And now I want you to ask yourself, what do I have in my hand? And if you could, just kind of share with us what's under your control right now. What are some of the skill sets, resources that you actually have in your hand that you have under control?
The only thing I have in my hands is me, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's all that you can control. And a lot of times, that's all we can control. We can only control ourselves. And that's the big thing, is that everything else we got to influence. But Lex, when we showed that model of the emotional intelligence, you have that self-awareness and self-regulation. So that is really all you can control. So in much of this, you just look at what if you're going to control anything, is you have to control you. In the military, we do an exercise that we call the 6-foot circle. And I jokingly tell my wife when I took her through this, and she's 4'11", so I said for her it's the 4'11" circle. We'll talk about that later. And 4'11.5", but we'll leave it at that. Okay. And what that is we have people stretch their arms out, and then they'll say, okay, the only thing you control is what's inside that circle, that 6-foot circle, and all that's in the circle is you. That's all that you can have control over. So much of this control is making sure that you have yourself under control and you're being focused on your thinking, how you're showing up, being aware of your anxieties, being aware of your triggers, so that you can now self-manage all that. And so now you put that under control. And then now that if I show up under control, now I can when I show up, I can have an influence on the situation. So I'm accepting what I'm facing, putting myself under control so that I can show up in a way that could positively influence the situation. And as you're going through the influence, this is about you identifying how you need to show up and whom you need to work with to move things forward for the better. So I'm having to be under self-control so that I can show up collaboratively. So I'm always asking people, how do you prepare every day to be collaborative? And if you think about that, how are you showing up? How are you preparing? What are some of the things how you're placing yourself under control so that you can show up and be collaborative to influence the situation so it be collaborative? Think about, are you making it easier for people to work with you right now? Are you under control in such a way it's easier for people to work with you? Go ahead.
I do have a question about this piece around what we can control. Mm-hmm. And recognizing it's our 6-foot or our 4'11" circle, right? For me, it's 2.5.
Yeah, there you go.
The challenge is when I'm not in a position, right, to influence. And I talk to a lot of our clients about this. how does a person prevent themselves from going into that place of apathy? Okay, this is what I can control, and it ain't a lot, and I am not able to influence the bigger circle. So how do folks deal with the anxiety and the fear and the inability to manage their emotions when in fact they don't feel like they can influence anything that matters, not anything that matters, or what matters, for example?
Okay, and I'm glad you said that, because part of what I'm hearing here is a kind of a three layered thing. Part of this is, first, I want you to understand, start with you first.
Okay.
And notice that possibly if we keep responding the same way, expecting a different outcome, I think that's the definition of insanity.
Pretty sure.
So if I show up a little bit more under control, could I have a greater influence? And when I'm talking influence, here's some things about influence we need to be aware of. Is sometimes we think influence is about somebody agreeing with us. And it may not be. Somebody can still, and so in that, part of that, the control you may understand, or influence you may have, that people may hear what you have to say, but they may just not agree that this is the time to do it. But what I want to remind people is that your influence is, a lot of times what we do is we want to have influence that time we walk in, we want it done the way we want it done right away. When actually what we may have not realized is we may have just planted a seed. We may have tilled the soil. We may have watered it. We may have picked up, removed some weeds. And we may not reap the harvest, but the harvest may be reaped by someone later. And I remind people that a lot of times for the workplace, a lot of times the people, your best employees, your best ones who are doing the work, it wasn't by the work that you did. You're reaping the harvest of someone else's work.
Very good.
Yeah, so in that, when we're talking this influence, you do have influence, and part of you to understand that you got influence is quit telling yourself you don't. So part of your influence is to ask yourself, if that's what you're saying, that you have no influence, but notice that people are listening to you.
Yeah.
They're listening to you. It's just that a lot of times that you thinking that just because they didn't agree with you, that you have no influence.
Very good.
And you do. We all have influence. I want to give you, for instance, I thought my parents were really stupid when I was young.
What? You're so original.
I thought they didn't know anything. And they thought I wasn't listening. But do you know now, a lot of things that they taught me, a lot of things that those the positive things and things that's working for me are what I realized that I learned from them. And they have an influence. And sometimes we're talking to our children, and we don't think they're listening. But when they do hit that moment where you go, oh, they were listening, you realize you had an influence and you said it anyway. You didn't hold back. You said it anyway. Even though the outcome they didn't do exactly what you asked them to do right away, you said anyway. And much of the time what's holding us back is because it's our own insecurities. It's our own fears. It's our own thinking that's preventing us from showing up saying, here's something I think we could do. Even if they accept it or not, that's okay. I put it out there. And it's on the table.
Very good.
Okay. And so in that, part of this influence piece too is I just want to show you something as we got something there. So part of us having influence is to consider this. Have we really defined what we wanted? What do I want? And I want you to think about conversations, think about situations. What do I want for me? What do I want for the other in this situation? And what do I want for the relationship? And a lot of times we're never thinking about those intentions. We just walk in, we have these conversations. And then we don't understand why it doesn't move. But if we stop and we think about what do I really want for me? What do I want for the other? And what do I want for the relationship? And let me just stop for a minute here. Notice I said, what do I want for the other, not from the other.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I'm having these conversations with people about the influence they have on other people, because you can't control anyone. You can only influence them. And so much of them I ask them, well, what do you want from that person? What do you want for that person? Well, what I want for them is to do what I tell them to do. That ain't what you want for them. That's what you want from them. So part of that too is really gonna, and so sometime I'll shift that question is, what's my hope for me in this engagement? What's my hope for the other person? What's my hope for the relationship? And then there's another question down that I use to tie all these together. How do I need to behave to get what I want? So part of that now, how do I need to be under control so that I can make all three of those things happen? How are we doing?
Excellent.
And then I also asked a question down there about the influence. You'll say, who is your shark? And I just want to remind people, if you ever watch Shark Tank, and when I'll ask that question is, what's the importance of Shark Tank? Why are people trying to get the shark? And it's not, if I was to make money, it's not really that. What the shark does is they have influence and can get you access and get things approved through that you can't do on your own. So part of your influence is you being collaborative, working with others and working with those and looking around saying, okay, who may have a skill set or who may know someone in a network that I don't know that can help us move this forward. And for some of you, you may be the shark. I don't know.
In some instances, we are, right?
You are the shark. And here's the thing I want you to think about. Some people think that you have no influence, but sometimes you have certain processes, maybe from someone who's at a line level. They can plug up the system if they haven't managed and being under control and saying, oh, this is just the right thing to do. This is the legal, the ethical, and the moral thing to do.
Yep.
So they have a lot more control and influence than they think. We all do. Yeah. So that's the part. What do I need to accept? Now what's under my control? And now that I'm under control, how can I show up to influence situations to move them forward? And I want you to be thinking about this. I know people think about the workplace, but I also want you to think about, say, significant others. A lot of times we may complain about how someone is and all the rest of that. And I hit a point after me and my wife have been together for 37 years. You know, I just realized she's probably not going to change. So certain things I just have to accept, just like she loves me for all my crazy, okay? And so we kind of accepted that. But what we do is we operate in a different way to help influence our relationship to grow. Influence so we can still be ourselves, but also we're making tweaks so that we can still be collaborative and kind of work through. And so I can show up different to influence this relationship so that it can grow.
Really powerful. The piece around how do I need to behave in order to get what I want. You just, demonstrated. I think that we could probably all use a little more accept our mate exactly as they are the keys to a happy and healthy, long marriage.
Yes. So sometimes even with our children, I'll just share this quickly story with you about my youngest son. When I was in England years ago, he was there with me, and my family was with me. And I think he was about 8 years old. And as 8 years old kids do, they forget sometime to tell you that they have an event the night before and they need something. So I had worked a long day, went in like 5 in the morning, came home about 8:30 that night. I came in, and the little fellow runs downstairs and he looks at me and he goes, Dad, I have an event tomorrow and I need a 12-pack of soda. And I wish I could say that I was under control, all the rest of that stuff, but I wasn't, and I lost it. And I looked at him, don't you know how busy I am? Don't you know who I am? And I'm just ranting and raving. And he just and I went on for about 5 minutes. And the little fellow just sat there and a tear started coming down his eye. And I stopped and I looked at him, I says, what are you crying about? And he stopped and he said this to me, and I never forgot. He said, why is it that every time someone at church or at work asks you to do something, you do it for them? But every time I ask you to do something, you yell at me. Okay, I didn't get the Parent of the Year award that year. Okay, but it reminds me of how possibly in these crisis situations, we're forgetting that we're dealing with our children who we're looking at them as adults when they're really not. They're doing the best they know how to do for what they know how to do. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to get all the rest of these things. And I just need to maybe I need to accept that. And I need to be a little bit more under control so I can actually influence the situation so the peace of the house is a little bit better.
Well, and we can map this to our coworkers and to
Yes.
those who we lead very
Mhm.
specifically. We already know prior to a crisis,
Right.
we have certain folks on our team who we find more combative, more difficult than others. Now is the time, if we are needing to collaborate, to accept them as they are, not require them to change, to put on the framework around, okay, how can I behave in order to influence the situation, in order to rally the team? How, in your experience, have really effective leaders adopted this, for example, in a crisis?
Part of the crisis is how I've seen them develop is they stopped and they because they knew their people, they knew possibly who had a skill set and who didn't. And so part of that is where they were aware of all these things, and so they accepted, okay, this would probably be the best one for this to do this. And then now I can, and then we could match this person up with this person, so now they can get some development as we go through this crisis. But I'm going to lean heavily on this
Okay.
person. And you'll see it right now. And I think I heard earlier talk today too, is you're seeing that people are having to accept that they're now having to give way to the experts. And you'll see it with like Dr. Fauci, Dr. Brex, and all those that they're right now, we're having to accept that, hey, you know, from a standpoint of, I don't care if you're the president, vice president, if you're this, you're that, it doesn't matter right now. What's needed, you have to accept that I'm having to take their advice. I'm having to lean on them more because they got this, because they understand this better than I do.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. All right. If we can move to the next one, I appreciate it. So you saw this earlier. Well, we have the recognition and regulation and also the personal competence and social competence. So if you could click one more time, please.
Yeah.
So much of that's control. If I'm under control, I have my recognition and my regulation, that's under control. Then if you can click one. And that's how I influence, by being social aware and being able to relationship manage. So I have to put myself under control first so I can have the influence. So right now, part of, if you want to have a greater influence, that's why right now we're developing that. Let's see, how am I under control? Am I preparing myself? Am I being intentional so I can have the influence I want? And what I want right now is influence of bringing some kind of calmness and kind of help people kind of work through this uncertainty. It's also part of the control part right now is kind of I'm having to get out of my fixed mindset that says I need to fear uncertainty. I'm having to go into a growth mindset that says I'm having to accept uncertainty. And what I'm reminding other leaders I've worked with earlier this week is, welcome to the world of VUCA: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This is what it is. This is the world we live in, where we could have one little thing that kind of shifts our whole thinking. So part of that is realize that this has actually been out there, is that a lot of times we just haven't been paying attention. Mm-hmm. But when we put ourselves under control and kind of be aware of what's going on and being able to regulate ourselves, no matter what the situation is, we can stop and say, okay, what do I need to do now? What do I have control over? And how do I need to be to kind of help the influence this so others can go in the same direction? And final there is, on this whole CIA process, and what this is, you'll see a formula down that says this E plus R equals O. If you click one more time, please. E is the event, R is your response, O could shift the outcome. So part of this, we have no control over any events that happen to us. We had no control over the things that have this pandemic. We really don't have control over this virus. And I think Dr. Fauci said it best. You're not going to tell this virus when it's going to end. It's in control right now. And so part of that, in event, in those events in life, at work, we're going to have events. But what we do is we have control over our response. And notice what I'm trying to do is, when you're under control, you can now respond. Much of times what we do, we're just reacting. But notice they're talking, we're doing a response right now. So part of your business, all of you, I just congratulate you and just celebrate what you're doing right now, is you're responding. You're having to stop. You're having to think about it. You're having to be very intentional about what you're doing right now so that you can have a better outcome. And sometimes that outcome is mitigating risk. Sometimes that outcome is trying to save jobs. Sometimes that outcome is just trying to bring some, a sense of kind of a a level that people can stand on, that your communities can work through. And that's what we're having to do. So once we put ourselves under control, understanding our influence, and accepting this is the scenario where we're at, understanding that what's under our control, and then defining how we need to show up, we could possibly work through a lot of these things right now. I see some things coming up. Were there some questions or something out there? Or?
Yeah, I've asked folks before you go, tell us what your takeaways are from your time with us today. For me, Ray, the word control can be deceptive because in and of itself, we take that to mean I can control something,
Right.
as if control is representative of something that is a mindset. And what I've learned today is no, this is about what can you actually control? And it's frankly very little. But what we can do is we can influence. And by accepting that that's where our real focus is, it's about shifting our emotions from feeling insecure, feeling anxiety. Glenn just wrote manage versus control and a big question mark. I think that the emotional intelligence of our peers at work and doesn't matter as much as our own emotional intelligence and applying what you've shared.
Thank you. Thank you. And you know, I just want to show, and as you move through this, I want you to consider this also in our development as we move through. And when all this before all this started, I realized that I was unconsciously incompetent because I wasn't aware of all it. And now I'm consciously incompetent. And so where I'm trying to move to is where I'm becoming consciously competent. In other words, going, okay, how do I process what I need so I can kind of get some sense of autonomy back and all the rest of that stuff. Till now, as I'm developing and growing in my emotional intelligence, it becomes unconsciously competent at it. So much of what I want everybody to remember is anything that's new, you don't know what you don't know. And then once you know something, you become consciously incompetent. And so that's going to be a scary part. It's going to be a part when you're there. So in that time frame too, you got to be careful how you're talking to yourself, what you're saying to yourself. You got to be just kind of be mindful and being very present. Okay, what is really going on? How can I go about? Who can I connect with? Where I get my information from? So that kind of gives you understand those kind of things too. Those small little things that you can take responsibility for, take control over. You have, and it will help you move forward. Notice what yours was, is you were a business owner, a business person said, I need to do something. Yeah. So for you, it was creating a format where you can send content out virtually to help others, to help them kind of work through some things. So that's where we're going all these things too, is notice everybody's got a different response. Everybody's got a different things that they can do. So much of this too is I want you to really kind of get a self-awareness of what kind of skill sets do you have that you could really kind of offer to people now, even though that, you know, there are some people who still need what you have. Yeah. And remember that you're still part of this world and that we're really connected. And that's the most valuable thing that we've got going through.
I want to share I agree. I want to share just a couple of takeaways. Cassie, thank you. She wrote, I liked the influence model and paying attention to what we are learning from this experience and accepting our situation and finding one small shift we can make. Sheila wrote, learning how I can improve myself on a daily basis and starting my day with that thought. What habits can I curb today? And Scott, thank you. He wrote, share knowledge, share personal impact, and ask for insight and help. Listen, and then influence towards an outcome you desire. Very powerful.
Thank you.
So we are wrapping up. We've got another webinar here shortly. I do want to let everyone know we are doing buy one, get one trainings, specifically virtual, around the topics that are relevant for a pandemic and the situation we're all facing: managing a newly remote workforce, neuro leadership and emotional motivation, leading through a crisis, business continuity, of course, preparing for layoffs and outsourcing and outplacement, etc. get in touch with me. I'm happy to share about our trainers that are around the country that have volunteered to do this work. I mentioned earlier, there's new leaders and experts coming in every single day, every Thursday and Wednesday of April. Our Leading in a Crisis Summit will continue. So, Ray, tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Oh, if you want to put my email address in there, that'd be fine. It's at rweaver@abogcoaching.com, abogcoaching.com.
ABODE coaching, right?
ABOGE.
That's right. Coaching.com. rweaver@abogcoaching.com.
That's correct.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ray. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your time with us today. Stay safe and healthy, and ring us if we can be supportive.
All right. Thank y'all. Have a good day now.
Thank you, Ray. Excellent.